What's the one thing you'll not around with? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. Not wearing hearing protection when necessary. Tinnitus sucks. Lost a decent chunk of my hearing on my right side due to pure stupidity on my end. Decided to set off an XL Roman candle in my hands, thinking it would spit out a ton of little shots. Nope. Full-on mortars. Completely lost my hearing in my right ear for a couple months, and when it came back, it's been permanently muffled, and I now have tinnitus. I used power tools as a teen and through my 20 seconds without earplugs muffs. I also attended some concerts without earplugs. At one show, I didn't wear earplugs, and it was a disaster for my hearing. The pain was intense. I was dizzy and vomiting, and my friend had to drive us back home in my car about half an hour into the show. It was disappointing, embarrassing, incapacitating, and horrid in every way. Now I have tinnitus and am partially deaf, which can make a person kind of irritable at times. Story 2. Just because you climbed up something doesn't mean you can climb down. Off-roading with my cousin in the late 2000s, we went into a dried-up riverbed and bombed around for a few hours. After a few hours, we decided to head back to camp and realized the trip down was way steeper than we had initially thought. After a whole bunch of different things to make it, me sitting behind the rear axle, him sitting behind the rear axle, standing on the front seat leaning forward, gunning it halfway up then rolling back down the cut-off road. Everything. The top bit was just too steep. He nearly flipped it twice. The sun was going down and we were getting kind of worried. Out of nowhere, this group of guys in a massive crew cab 12-valve Ram came and pulled us up the hill in exchange for the rest of the beer we had on us. Lesson: Jeep doesn't mean you can climb everything. Story 3. Do not attach two very active dogs to the handle of a Razor scooter because you want to see if they be good sled dogs. Do not attach any dog to anything with wheels unless that dog has gone through extensive training to know how to safely move with whatever it's attached to. This includes but is not limited to scooters, bikes, cars, carts, roller skates, wheelchairs, rollators, and much more. Sincerely, a service dog handler whose DPG had to go through lots of training to learn how to safely walk alongside my mobility aids, automatically match my speed, ignore any distractions, and learn how to safely maneuver, position himself just right, and so he doesn't accidentally get in the way. Story 4. Sleep deprivation. Dank nearly died in a car accident round 1, then went mildly psychotic and paranoid round 2. Just dumb. There are better paths to adrenaline-fueled euphoria. Never make decisions when you are tired but don't know it. What does that mean? You clearly stayed up 16+ hours and you should be tired, but you don't feel it. Don't make decisions. At that point, you'll start having all sorts of racing negative thoughts, doom and gloom, want to break up with your boyfriend, etc. You might even have mild hallucinations. Was that a bug? No, just a shadow. And yet doctors in training are responsible for making life and death decisions during 24-hour shifts. I don't want anyone making medical decisions for me on their 23rd hour awake. Story 5. Paying my taxes. Worked for myself through college and didn't have a penny to spare, so I just didn't file for 3 years, figuring I'd pay it off when I was done and working. Ironically, my first job after graduating was for the state tax and rev dept. They figured it out and gave me a month to make good. Paid some pretty serious interest and penalties and learned to never do that again. My tax lady had to file my taxes a week or so later. She told me how much I owed, and with penalties and interest, it was like an extra $10. Okay, cool, whatever. A couple months later, I get a letter from the IRS. Open it up. I've underpaid my debt, and I need to remit the balance immediately. Well, here we go. How much? $6.87. Took care of it that minute. Story 6. Customs officers. They have no sense of humor. Don't ask me how I know. First time I went to the USA, I was on the website of the National Security Service reading everything to make sure I had everything correct. First thing I read in the FAQ and tips page, do not try to make fun of the custom officer. I was absolutely not planning to. One time I was traveling from Ireland to the US. Got to US Customs. Dude asked me like 3 simple questions and then sent me to secondary processing. Now, in Ireland, US Customs is located in Dublin Airport, so I was just sitting here for an hour wondering if I'm even going to make my flight. Eventually, my name is called, my passport is stamped, and I'm free to go. I asked what the issue was and was just told that they can't disclose that information. Really felt like they were just bored and felt like with someone. Story 7. Pit bulls. My family has always had and loved dogs. Thought the breed was fine and just got a bad rep. My dad brought a puppy home. We had her for 6 years. Loved her, house-trained, no behavior issues, we thought. Came home one day and she had killed our old boxer, who had been with her every day that we had her and also was so old she had no teeth and was chewing on her severed leg like a chicken bone. Never again. And it makes me want to puke when people have their children crawling around with these dogs. Story 8. Don't work full-time and go to school full-time. I was like, meh, I can do whatever I put my mind to. It broke my brain. I repressed my stress, but my brain and body didn't care. Started waking up in middle night with panic attacks thinking I was dying. Got agoraphobia. Places like airports and malls, I would get vertigo, dizzy and lightheaded and feel like I was floating, which would trigger what is wrong with me panic attack. Rinse, repeat. I went to doctor and he was like, you are doing way too much. Stop doing that. And he was right. So you actually can do too much. And even if you can brute force it, your brain and body will eventually rebel against you. Story 9. Regular checkups and screenings. Get the colonoscopy on schedule. Get the skin check yearly. Get your prostate exam or pap smear. If you smoked or are high risk, get scans for lung cancer regularly. Talk to your doctor. Find out what you should get and when, and follow the schedule. I have lung cancer, one of the 20% of people with lung cancer that never smoked, and the difference between the outcomes from stage 1 to stage 4 is literally life and death. Do not wait for symptoms. Do not put off getting that weird mole checked. If only it were that easy. Cost money. When you live paycheck to paycheck, it's not as simple as go get checked out. Well, guess I'm not eating this week. Story 10. Dehydration and overheating. Being covered in ice in an ambulance and pissing black pee will change your perspective. Edit. One thing I have never really explained to anyone is how big of a personal victory it was for me when I regained the ability to work out hard and push myself. The experience I described below took a huge amount of recovery physically and psychologically, and when I got back to a healthy state of going hard, not being afraid of my heart getting up into the cardio zones, etc., was like regrowing a cut-off limb and winning the lottery, and coming back from the darkest inner fears, and I don't know if I could ever communicate how big a deal it was for me. Story 11. Inverted storm surge. This happens as a hurricane approaches a coastline. If you search, you'll find pictures of people walking around in shallow, empty stretches of beach. The storm gets close enough, and the low pressure within the eye basically sucks up millions of gallons, pulling it away from shore. It can go for miles sometimes, depending on the strength. Anyway, that water comes back, with prejudice. I grew up on the Alabama Gulf Coast, walked down to the beach as a hurricane was approaching. I was in middle school and had no idea you couldn't see a hurricane the same way you can a tornado. Anyway, the beach was drained entirely. Not knowing any better, I walked out to the end of the public fishing pier that would normally be about 8 to 9 feet deep. A few minutes passed and I was satisfied with this excursion, so I turned around. About 2/3 RDs of the way back to the shore, I felt the ground rumble, and I instinctively hauled ass as fast as I could. I'd say I finally got to about 20 feet from a jetty, rocks piled up to mitigate erosion, and got hit from behind by a wall of water. It actually carried me up and onto the very top of the jetty and slammed me down. I could feel that my sandals left my feet, and by pure luck, they floated up and gently settled right by my hands where I was holding onto the rocks. The water receded slightly, enough for me to get over the jetty and away from the beach. I was so embarrassed that I never told my mom about it and snuck into my house to get a shower and change. Story 12. Weathermen. Heard one on TV say, if you're within the sound of my voice, get to your tornado place now. I was a little jaded due to the many times I'd heard this before. Still, I told my son to get in the hallway, then went outside to get our beagles. And I saw the thing. A 400 meters wide F4 coming down our road. I got in the hallway with just a couple big couch cushions, pulled my son into my lap, hunched over him and held the pillows over us. He was unhurt. I had a dislocated shoulder with torn ligaments, tendons and muscle, splintered ball, torn rotator cuff, and so on. I was in so much pain from that once all the pieces stopped moving, that I didn't even realize I had hundreds of pieces of rock, splinters, and glass embedded in my skin, mainly in my back. Not a single thing even scratched my son. Had I gotten moving the moment he said that on the TV, we would have been sandwiched between two mattresses. We lived, both of us, both dogs and our cat. It seems like we were all huddled under those two cushions. One of the dogs had a single glass shard in his neck left side. It fell out when he started walking. Me, I had pieces of stuff being pushed out of my skin for the next month. The house? Nothing much left. Of a $290,000 house, it took $273,000 to rebuild it. The foundation and much of the framing were okay. Story 13. GHB, no hangover. Makes you more social. Like booze but better. Like Molly but better. No calories. You feel great about yourself. You are more empathetic. You can score it for super cheap. You never have to feel bad again. You can use it to manage your sleep. You can use it to manage everything you don't like. You can do it every day and feel great. You can use it to sleep because you can't anymore because you're so addicted. You can use it 24/7 so that you don't go into DTs. You can use it after you have a seizure from doing it so much. You can use it to forget about that fact that you ended up in a hospital because of it. You can use it to forget about that fact that no one wants to hang out with you anymore because you're high-key crazy and out of control. You can use it to try to end your life because you ruined it by doing G constantly. You can detox and have the worst few weeks of your life and still crave it. You can spend 4 years in treatment and recovery and have to completely rebuild your life from scratch and still crave it all these years later. You can go through your life sober for years, but knowing that if you ever have another drop of it, you will binge until you're very shortly thereafter dead. Are we still having fun? Story 14. Flipping the bird at a driver. It's been 40 years since I tried. On that particular adventure, I was on a 4-lane road, 2 in each direction, RTE 29 through Virginia. I was going maybe 5 miles per hour over the speed limit to pass a slow car when a car came up on my tail. The road wasn't limited access and had a lot of blind driveways. Going more than 55 really wasn't safe. The highway, named Dixie Highway, has also been referred to as Dixie Die Way. Anyway, I passed the slow car as quickly as I could safely do so, then pulled over to the right as soon as I was safely in front of the slow vehicle. The guy who'd been riding my tail passed me at a high rate of speed, and I held up the third finger as he passed. Oops. The driver obviously saw it as he pulled in front of me the instant he was past me and jammed on his brakes. I was so relieved that I didn't lose control of the car. Since then, I avoid anything that might induce a road rage incident. The satisfaction of displaying your annoyance from the comfort of your car isn't worth the consequences. Story 15. It's a lot easier to get lost in the woods than you think. I wandered away from our campsite a little tipsy because I love looking for mushrooms. I kept going in just a little further until one time when I looked back, I couldn't see my wife and friend back at the site. A few big steps to the left to reorient myself. Wait, maybe a few steps over in this direction. I yelled for help, but the sound didn't carry. The sun was just setting when I went in, but it got dark a lot faster in the thick of the forest. I panicked. I ran. I cursed at myself. I yelled for help over and over. Finally, I heard a truck rumbling in the distance. When it was all said and done, I popped out on a gravel road 3 kilometers west of our campsite. Looking at a map after, had I gone any other direction, it was just forest with no end in sight. I got incredibly lucky. It was the longest 90 minutes of my life, and I don't know what would have happened if that truck hadn't been going for a late evening drive along the service road. I thought I was going to die. Alright folks, that's a wrap. If you like this, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also share your those in the comment below.